I've been very lucky in business. My grandfather, James E. Hanifen Sr., was a sergeant in World War I, and he was a recovery specialist. And so when he came back to Des Moines after the war, he started a kind of a body shop type business. And to bring the vehicles to the body shop, you got to have a tow truck. So my grandfather started the company back in 1923. When he passed away in 1957, my father took over, James E. Hanifen Jr., with his two brothers, Bob Hanifen and John Hanifen. So after I graduated, of course, 1982 was kind of in the middle of the end of a recession. Couldn't find a job in biology, so my dad offered me a job. He said, I've got you a 1980 Honda. That's going to be your car. And I said, oh, okay, that was nice. He said, let's look at it. And we walked out in the shop and it was rolled over. And he said, but you can fix it. So I fixed the car, but he kind of bribed me to come into work for him. And then probably about 86 is when things were starting to click that I was in the office and kind of taking charge for sure. About 4 or 5 years later, I became CEO of Hanifen Company. And then in 2017, the business was sold to John Curtis and Matt Hurd.
Julie had when she started really getting serious about the succession, the move, the stepping out, Matt's name had come up, and she had this conversation with him in some way, shape, or form, and got us together, and we started talking.
Of course, Matt knew all my financials because he's my banker.
I've always had an entrepreneurial spirit, and that interested me. When I first met Julie, the business was a little bit smaller, but still a long-standing Des Moines company, a name that everybody knew in the Des Moines area, and most people in the state of Iowa.
I don't think there could have been a better option for what we did. It was really too big for one person to take on. I think we make a great team, and I think it was a great move.
They had been around for 80 years. They had a good fleet of trucks. The business has grown in the last 15 years to almost double the size of the fleet. There's a lot on our plate every single day, and as a small business, we wear a lot of different hats, and John and I complement each other well in that, so it's been a good fit so far.
The one thing that I've heard from trucking companies that are members of the Iowa Motor Truck Association when it comes to Hanifen is that they're very reliable and they're honest. And whenever a trucking company and a towing company have to interact, it's not usually for a good reason. You know, there's been an accident, there's been some sort of an incident. And so it's under circumstances that are less than favorable. So for the trucking company executives to walk away from that experience and still come back and say, Hanifen is a great company, they're honest, they're reliable, they took care of us in a really bad situation. To hear that consistently from companies of all sizes, trucking companies from all sizes, to me that says it all.
We started using Hanifen in 1974 when I worked for Hyman Freightways. And we used Hanifen because they could do the job. They had the equipment and they were responsive, and we appreciated that. And then when I went into business for myself, then we just continued that relationship.
I think it's funny that you can go somewhere in a different state and somehow start talking about your industry, and then you bring up Hanifen Towing and people know. Hanifen Towing just isn't regionalized in the Des Moines area. It's known throughout. It's 100 years. That's big. I don't know how you put, even in a video like this, how you capture 100 years. But the best part about Hanifen's was every time you called and anybody you sent, it didn't matter what person showed up from here, they're always professional, they're always dressed professional. The trucks are second to none.
If we need a special job done, we call Hanifen's, just because we worked with them since '77 when I started there, and before I started there, they was always using Hanifen's. I've seen all kinds of different tow trucks come down the driveway, but if our shop needed a box picked up off a truck or a truck backed in our shop that we couldn't move, we always call Hanifen's. There's nothing they can't lift.
Over the years, as we have worked together, Hanifen has grown and their equipment has become more and bigger and more able. And as our requirements have increased, so has Hanifen's equipment. And so that relationship has continued real well.
The representation of our shop to a customer that's sitting on the side of the road or sitting in an accident is a representation of the first vehicle that pulls up to it. And when that Hanifen's truck pulls up there, that is a representation of our shop, and that shows what you're stepping into.
It's starting to sound like a sales pitch. We've been in business since 1975, and so that's 48 years. When we started our business, Hanifen had been going for 52 years. And I remember thinking at the time, that's a very amazing thing. What business survives 52 years? And now I'm thinking, well, wait a minute, maybe ours does. We're pleased about that. But 100 years, that's a really long time. And so that's a real testimony in my mind to the people that have worked to make the transitions work. I know from my perspective, it's a big deal and took a lot of planning and execution to transfer to a second generation. But to transfer to a third generation, most business don't survive that. And so this one's past the third generation now. And so to me, that's an amazing testimony.
They're a strong company with a good reputation, and that as a banker, you were always looking to work with the best of the best. And they were known as the best of the best and still are. But you wanted to work with those people, and that was what intrigued me as a banker, as a business person. You know, only the strong survive, and Hanifen's been a strong company for a long time.
It's a big history. I mean, my father-in-law and mother-in-law, Ted and Luann, were using Hanifen's a lot for towing and stuff like that. The way they treat them, the way they bring them, and the way they just handle it, everything to my doorstep changed everything. Anymore, it's about 5-star treatment, red carpet treatment, they say. When you're calling them, that's how we're starting it. And that's how we like to end it. And we like to show it across the board.
I think we treated people well. And what I mean by that is nobody ever called me up and said, "Hey, how you doing, Julie?" They say, "Julie, I got a problem." And they expected us to solve it. And when somebody's got a problem, you don't want to be taken advantage of because you got a problem. You want to be treated fair. And I think when you have customers for 50, 60 years, I think that's a pretty good sign that you treated them right.
You don't just luck into being in business for 100 years, that's for sure. So it's something we want to celebrate.
And as long as I've been affiliated with the association and with Hanifen, that has been a consistent message. And I think the folks at Hanifen, from Jimmy to Julie, they set the culture here. Every employee in the company, even from the 1980s until today, really deserve a lot of credit. They're cutting edge when it came to equipment and towing and recovery issues. But additionally, they were also very committed to their role in overall highway safety. And Hanifen always understood that that is as equally important as being a good provider of their services. Getting that accident cleared up, getting that roadway opened up so that there's not secondary accidents. And that was something even, Jimmy talked about back in the 80s, about how they were committed to highway safety. And I think we forget that towing and towing companies in general, that's really an important priority. And Hanifen has never lost sight of that.
September 13th, 2011. It was a beautiful day, 70 degrees out, sun shining. I got a phone call about 7 o'clock at night, and Justin said he couldn't get a hold of Dan and Jesse. They were picking up a truck at mile marker 182 on I-80 westbound. And I said, "What do you mean you can't get a hold of them?" And he said he got a phone call from a guy that we knew and said there was some kind of commotion going on over there. Something's wrong. I got a phone call from the troopers, and they said, "Julie, there's been an accident." That was a bad night.
It's hard because Jesse and I were same age. And Dan was Dan. He was obviously much older, but just the nicest guy ever. And that was just a normal night. And 80, however many years at that point, 88 or 89 years, they'd never had an incident like that in their history. You hear maybe about a tow truck driver getting killed. Like, you can't imagine how common it is. And actually it's more common than any law enforcement or DOT or anything. I mean, it's crazy.
It was also the springboard, because of Julie's insistence, for change and for making changes legislatively that would provide even more protection to towing and recovery professionals when they're out on the road. And for somebody to have that vision in the face of a tragic situation like that, again, speaks to the leadership that Julie and her team had at Hanifen. Because, I mean, it was a day or two probably after the accident that I got the call, what can we do? We obviously need stronger laws to protect these folks that are out there doing these towing and recovery operations. And we then immediately started working on the move over law.
And they put together a legislation, and we got a petition. I think we had over 2,500 signatures, and we took it down in the State House. And we passed a stiffer law, move over, slow down. And that's probably one of my proudest achievements.
There's still probably work that could be done on it, but I mean, every little bit helps. And every state is a little different, but I mean, I think about every state now has some version of that law, and it's generally due to some kind of terrible tragedy, just like what's happened here.
We're in the same industry, but not in the same industry, but we can relate to each other about what's taking place. I mean, when they have massive snowstorms, we'll send pizzas down here to these guys. Or we know they're working just as hard as we're working, and we'll try and do something nice for everybody across the board, because everybody gets it.
When my dad kind of retired and was kind of out of the business for a while, every day he'd call up, Are we doing okay? I said, I don't know, Dad, I think we're going broke. I said, man, I just don't know if we're gonna make it till tomorrow. And he's call up the next day. We doing okay? Yeah, we're pretty busy today, Dad. I think we can make it till tomorrow. And he'd call up the next day. We doing okay? I don't know. Maybe we're going broke again. But he'd call every day to see how everything was going. After my dad's stroke and after we had sold the business, every time I talked to my dad, how are they doing? Are they doing okay? He said, yeah, they're pretty busy, Dad. Are you sure? I said, yeah, I was down there the other day, and man, they got trucks in Illinois, they got trucks in Nebraska. They had a rollover last week, and I said, they're doing just fine, Dad. I'm catching myself doing the same thing. My dad, he was a character. He loved this job.
He wasn't really involved per se when I first started here. He was around, but I think he was retired for the most part, and I rarely saw him, but he was something else. Back then, all the trucks had company radios in them. The office had a radio antenna, and one of the things from our past was that we were a radio dispatched towing service. And Jim had a company radio in his pickup. And I was over in West Des Moines, which is where he happened to live, and was picking up a wrecked vehicle from, I think it was the State Farm office, like the main State Farm office. And I was sitting at an intersection, and on the radio, all I hear is, I see you. And I didn't think they were talking to me, because you'd hear the drivers chatter and the office could talk to everybody. And all of a sudden he goes, I'm talking to you, number 4. And now I'm like looking around, and he goes, I see everything. I'm like God. I'm like, okay. And I go on into what I'm doing, and then here he comes pulling in there and has to stop and give me some grief for a little bit, and then he took off. But yeah, the Jim stories could go on for a long time.
Years ago, when I was working for my first boss, was a car nut, built street rods, had old cars laying around. Well, when they lifted this truck off the flatbed, a tire fell off the truck and bounced right into the trunk of like a 53 Chevy and destroyed it. That's probably the funniest thing that's ever happened. And other than that, nothing ever dangerous has ever happened or anything like that. They're just a good towing company, and they're all my friends. They're like family to our shop, they are.
We'd end up going out to have a beer, and as you're sitting there talking, here comes 3 customers that I know that I consider really good friends, and then they're throwing Matt high fives at the same time. I'm like, whoa, wait, I'm missing something here. I'm like, how'd you get out and meet these guys already? He's like, I've known them for 10 years. I'm like, oh, this is a group that's not gonna be good.
When my mom would work, I'd come up here and work and do odd jobs. You know, sweep the floors, just do anything that my dad told me to do or stay out of. We grew up here. My cousins were hanging around. My Uncle Bob ran the body shop. My Uncle John ran the salvage yard. My dad was kind of more in charge of the towing part of it, but oversaw everything. So you just kind of grew up here with all your cousins and that. So it was a good time.
If you think about it, Chevrolet, Ford, you know, they're only 110, 120 years old. We didn't start too much longer after they did. As soon as there was vehicles on the road, you know, there was a need for towing and there was a need for fixing and repairing vehicles. And Julie's grandpa started that business shortly after Ford and Chevy were in business. So it speaks volumes of their integrity, their culture. It's important to us.
It's a team effort from everybody, and everybody puts it in. But that got instilled, in my opinion, through Julie. Like, Julie set that way, and that's how these guys are going to do it. And that's, I think, what's made it so seamless. She showed them the path. It was a great path, and they followed down it and just kept it moving. And I don't think it's changed from there.
Our customers know what to expect when they see a Hanifen driver and a truck, and when we're bringing them, you know, something broke down or whatever, our customers call us specifically because they know what product they're going to get from us.
Hanifen has always treated us fairly. They're honest. If they make a mistake, they fix it. Maybe more than that, they're responsive. And I don't know if they give everyone the sudden service that they give us. It'd be fun to think that we're special, so they're really doing it for us, but they may be just doing it for everybody. So I think if you can find somebody that's going to be fair with you and that the response time is good and they're not going to break things too much, then that's who you need to use. And so that's the reason that we use Hanifen.
It was built on a foundation that started way back when, that still prevails today. And I think that foundation is just being honest and reliable and good at what you do, diversified into all these other areas. They know what they do well, and they are doing it very well. And so to hit this milestone is something that's incredible, and they should be very proud of it because it's very special. I would not think we're gonna see a lot of companies, even in the foreseeable future, that are gonna hit that 100-year milestone. So it's just really an accomplishment that says so much about the Hanifen family, the Hanifen culture, and what they do in the towing industry.
I mean, it gives you goosebumps if you sit here and think about it. I mean, come on, a company celebrating 100 years. Find me another family-owned company. Family-owned, traditional values that they have, that's still here and thriving and growing.
When you think of companies that are 100 years old, Coca-Cola, Disney this year is celebrating 100 years. You know, some very large companies. We're a family-owned small business that doesn't have the revenues that a lot of those large companies do have. For us to be celebrating this, it's special. We want to be around for 100 years longer. And when you create a culture of family, a culture of customers that are as great as we have, then it's really special.
I guess what excites me is the future. I mean, the way the vehicles are changing so fast, the technology is changing so fast. It doesn't matter, it all still breaks down. They're still gonna need towing services. The opportunity to grow and expand our footprint is always there. So I mean, I think the sky's the limit.
They're increasing business every year. They've got the same attitude and morals that I had. And I think that the new blood helped immensely. You know, I was kind of old school. They do things a little different, and that's not a bad thing. It's, you know, it's always a good thing. Change is a good thing. So I couldn't be more proud of them.
I'm proud to be part of it. You know, I'm excited for the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years if my family wants to be involved in it, or John's family wants to be involved in it, or, you know, we have employees that we identify as family that want to be part of it. Hanifen's going to be around for another 100 years. There's no doubt in my mind.